and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. President Lee Jae-myung said it would be undesirable to scrap past deals on wartime issues that South Korea reached with Japan on issues of Korean wartime sex slaves and forced laborers. He told a Japanese news outlet that although the deals may be difficult to accept, they are commitments made between nations. And the president appeared on Arirang's special program and addressed the power of Korean culture, joining experts and artists, including the director of Netflix animated film Kpop Demon Hunters. As the U.S. pushes for a three-way summit with Putin and Zelensky to end the Ukraine war, Russia says security talks without Moscow are a road to nowhere, in an apparent warning to the West as it scrambles to work out guarantees for Kyiv's future protection. President Lee Jae-myung had an interview with a Japanese newspaper ahead of his trip to Tokyo this weekend for talks with Japan's Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba. For more, we have our presidential office correspondent Yoon Jung-min on the line for us. Jung-min, what did the president have to say on Seoul's relationship with Tokyo?
Minji, the South Korean leader said it would be undesirable to overturn agreements that were reached with Japan on wartime issues of Korean sex slaves and forced laborers. In an interview with Japan's Yomiuri Shimbun, released Thursday morning, President Lee acknowledged that though the deals finalized under previous conservative governments are difficult to accept, they are commitments made between nations. At the same time, he noted the feelings of the South Korean people should be taken into account, adding that what could be more important than compensation is offering words of consolation in a sincere manner. In 2015, the so-called Comfort Women Agreement was reached under the Park Geun-hye administration. And in 2023, the third-party compensation scheme for wartime laborers was agreed under the Yoon Suk-yeol administration. Those agreements sparked some backlash in Korea. He also stressed the importance of the Seoul-Tokyo relationship ahead of his talks with Japan's Ishiba this weekend, hoping to expand cooperation on the economy, society, and culture.
Right, and Jung-min, he also mentioned regional security, right? What was his message?
Right, Inji, he did mention North Korea's nuclear issues, outlining a three-stage roadmap that involves freezing, reducing, and dismantling the North nuclear and missile programs. He added that this will be pursued while maintaining a close coordination with the U.S. and pursuing active inter-Korean dialogue. It's the first time that President Lee unveiled such a solution over North Korea's nuclear issues. I also have to note that he will be flying straight from Tokyo to Washington this weekend for his first summit with U.S. President Donald Trump. That's all from me now. Back to you, Inji.
All right, thank you for that, Jung-min. And President Lee, who has long highlighted the borderless power of culture, appeared on a special Arirang TV program and vowed more government support and investment in culture. Our top office correspondent Jong Jin reports.
Wearing a sky blue jacket instead of his usual dark suit, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung on Wednesday joined a star-studded panel on Arirang TV's special program, Kpop, The Next Chapter. The president was joined by Maggie Kang, writer and director of the Netflix hit Kpop Demon Hunters, girl group Twice members Jihyo and Jonghyun, producer RT, and music critic Kim Young-dae to discuss the future of K-pop and more broadly, the K-culture industry. Reflecting on the global boom in Korean culture, President Lee emphasized that its potential is far from exhausted.
How far do you think South Korea has come as a cultural heavyweight?
지금 우리가 좀 문화가 강한 나라로 향해 들어가고 있죠. 가장 한국적인 것이 가장 세계적인. 우리 자신감을 가져도 된다니까.
For that to happen, the president underscored the need for a solid support system, pointing out that government investment in culture has been lacking for decades.
정말 이런 위대한 작품이나 예술가들이 나온다는 것 자체가 정말 대단하지 않습니까? 그렇죠. 기적에 가깝다고 보실 것 같아요. 정부 입장에서는 정말 길게 보고 문화 산업을 키우되 문화적 토양도 대대적인 투자 지원을 해서 더 많은 사람들이 도전할 수 있게, 학습할 수 있게.
At the same time, he also reaffirmed his administration's principle of supporting without interference.
문화는 자유로움을 본질로 하는데요. 자유로워야 되잖아요. 개성이 있어야 되고 창의적이라야 되고 영혼이 자유로워야 되는데 블랙리스트니 뭐 이래서 감시하고 규제하고 선별하고 이러니까 사실 현장에서 문화예술이 좀 죽어가는 측면도 있는데 이제 자유로운 환경을 만들어주고 물도 많이 줘서 잘 자랄 수 있게 해주고 그 안에서 경쟁해서 또 새로운 영역도 생겨나고.
The hour-long program explored ways to further expand the global reach of Korean culture. Panelists suggested creating arena-style performance venues and more opportunities to showcase not only K-pop, but a wider range of genres. Building on this, the Lee administration aims to position South Korea as one of the world's leading cultural powerhouses. 송유진, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, former First Lady Kim Gun-hee, who is accused of violating the Political Funds Act, will once again appear for questioning before a special counsel team on Thursday. Kim is set to appear for questioning at 2 p.m. for her third summons since her arrest last week. She was originally scheduled to appear on Wednesday, but requested a one-day delay, citing health issues. Thursday's questioning is expected to center on allegations of her receiving luxury gifts from the Unification Church through a shaman in exchange for business favors. With several issues under investigation, prosecutors have sought and obtained court approval to extend Kim's detention until August 31st. On the diplomatic front, President Lee is set to hold a summit with his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump next Monday in Washington. For more on what to expect from the meeting, we're joined by Professor Robert Kelly, Professor of International Relations at Busan National University. Professor Kelly, thanks for joining us this morning.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So this will be President Lee's first trip to the U.S. since taking office in early June. Could you tell us more about the significance of this visit?
Well, the United States and Korea, of course, have been allies for a long time, and so it's wise for the heads of state to meet one another on a regular basis, right? I believe every South Korean president has met his or her U.S. counterpart within 6 months of taking office. This is not unanticipated. In fact, I think everybody really expected this to happen. The issues are a little bit trickier than usual now. I imagine we'll get to this, but the tariffs have become sort of a real issue, right? It's in the Korean papers all the time. And I think there's also some discussion about security. It's going to be pretty tricky because the United States really wants U.S. forces and U.S. allies in East Asia to begin focusing on China. This is something that's really sensitive, particularly for progressive governments in South Korea. And so I have the feeling that this summit, if they really get in and discuss the issues, could be there could be a lot of disagreement.
Right, like you said, a lot of tricky issues. And President Lee has previously talked about pursuing pragmatic diplomacy, sort of centered on national interest. Do you think we'll see that in action when he meets President Trump next week?
Yeah, so the Americans have kind of read this to mean that South Korea is going to be softer on North Korea and China and tougher on Japan. This is something that you would expect from progressive governments in Korea, and that has traditionally led to tension with the United States, right? We saw that really clearly when Moon Jae-in was president, right? It got so bad between Korea and Japan that the U.S. had to step in. I think the Americans are really concerned that that kind of thing is going to happen again. Although I would point out in passing that the Trump government is significantly less concerned about that than the Biden or the Obama government, right? I mean, Donald Trump just doesn't care about U.S. allies as much as other U.S. presidents have. So if Korea, Japan really goes off the rails, I don't actually know if the Americans will step in as they have in the past. But generally speaking, if South Korea wants to be a U.S. ally, that means it's a U.S. ally, and that means it's got to sort of more or less stay within the frame, if you will, on U.S. behavior in East Asia, right? So if South Korea really goes freelancing on China, for example, that's going to be a real problem. And I think the Lee government has been hearing this behind the scenes from U.S. think tankers and from the American foreign policy community. And I think they're kind of in a bit of a bind here because I think the Lee government would like to do stuff that sort of expresses this independence, right? But, the cost of that could be declining or thinning U.S. alliance ties.
Right, and on North Korea says South Korea can't be its diplomatic partner, even as Seoul, tries to ease sort of tensions with Pyongyang. Could the meeting between Presidents Lee Jae-myung and Donald Trump open the door to talks with Kim Jong-un?
It looks like the North Korean government just does not want to talk to the South Korean government. I have to admit, I find that kind of surprising. Traditionally, progressive governments in South Korea have been willing to sort of meet North Korea, certainly far more than conservative governments. If you're North Korea, progressive governments, the opportunity for you to look for a deal. So I'm kind of surprised it doesn't happen. It is possible that Donald Trump could reopen diplomacy with North Korea, but to be honest, if I were the North Koreans, I would be awfully skeptical about that, right? And we all remember 2018, 2019, it was all kind of thrown together. Nothing really came out of it. The Trump people showed up in Hanoi without any real sense of what to ask for. When the one deal fell apart, they both just kind of stormed out of the room and canceled the lunch. I would be awfully surprised if the North Koreans were to come back for that without something much more concrete from the U.S. and South Korean side. And perhaps that'll be a part of the summit, but I don't know, given how intransigent the North Koreans have been recently.
I see. In South Korea and the United States, they kicked off their annual military drills this week. And a lot of attention is now on how the Korean government will handle the security issue, especially the cost sharing for American troops stationed here in Korea. How do you see that playing out?
I would imagine that Donald Trump at the summit, or at least through his negotiators later, will ask for a substantial expansion in the special measures agreement payment. Right now, roughly the Koreans pay about half, which is about $1 billion. I would imagine that Donald Trump is going to ask for double or triple or quadruple that figure. He's done this in the past. We know that Donald Trump often sort of measures foreign policy success in terms of dollars brought in. That's how he markets the tariffs. That's how he's talked to Ukraine, right? He's really pushing the Ukrainians hard to make these big commitments to buy American weapons. And so I think South Korea needs to really think about this, right? Is it worth paying the Americans more for the alliance or not? I mean, this is just not the Biden administration anymore, the sort of belief and sort of shared values, and we're in this together. The Trump people just don't think that way, right? And the Trump people want to see the money on the table. And I think the South Koreans are going to struggle with that. My own sense is that it's actually a really good bargain for South Korea. South Korea is quite a wealthy country. Paying more for a world-class security commitment from the world's only superpower strikes me as a really, really good bargain. But I think there's a real problem. There's a real issue of sort of national pride and humiliation, the perception that South Korea was snubbed by Trump and is sort of paying him off. If that's how this thing gets marketed, the South Korean public's going to turn against it.
Right, I guess we'll have to see how that plays out next week. All right, Professor Kelly, thank you so much for your insight today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Amid efforts to bring an end to the prolonged war in Ukraine, Moscow says it must be part of international talks on Ukraine's security. The comments come as NATO military leaders gather to discuss security guarantees for Kyiv. Our Park Junan has more.
While the U.S. and NATO have been discussing possible security guarantees for Ukraine as part of a peace deal in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Moscow on Wednesday said security discussions without Moscow are a road to nowhere.
We cannot agree with the fact that it is now proposed to resolve collective security issues without the Russian Federation. And I am sure that in the West, and above all in the United States, they understand perfectly well that seriously discussing security issues without the Russian Federation is a utopia, a road to nowhere.
This comes as NATO military leaders discussed security guarantees for Ukraine in a post-conflict scenario. Although the specifics were not revealed, it is believed that in-depth talks took place on implementing the European-led security guarantees for Ukraine. Ukraine has strongly disagreed on Russia's involvement in security guarantees since early stages of war back in 2022. Prior to Russian Foreign Minister's remark, the U.S.-based outlet Politico reported on Tuesday that a trilateral summit could take place in Budapest, Hungary, bringing together U.S. President Donald Trump, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and Russian President Vladimir Putin. However, as Russia has insisted that it must be given equal footing with other countries such as the U.S., China, the U.K., and France when it comes to discussing any security guarantees for Ukraine, some media outlets have raised doubts over whether Putin will attend the peace summit with Zelensky. 박준환, Arirang News.
Over in the Middle East, Israel says it's calling up around 60,000 reservists ahead of a planned ground offensive aimed at capturing and occupying all of Gaza City. Meanwhile, 10 Hamas militants were killed after they attempted to ambush an IDF outpost in southern Gaza. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
The Israeli military says it is calling up around 60,000 reservists ahead of a planned ground offensive aimed at capturing and occupying all of Gaza City. The military says it will go ahead with the operation with the aim of eliminating Hamas.
We will deepen the attack on Hamas in Gaza City, a stronghold of governmental and military terror for the terrorist organization. We will intensify the strikes on the terror infrastructure above and below ground and sever the population's dependence on Hamas.
According to Israeli officials, the reservists will begin reporting for duty in September, but most of the forces for the operation will come from active duty units already on the ground. The move comes as Israel prepares to order hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in Gaza City to evacuate south. The government announced its intention to seize the entire Gaza Strip after the ceasefire and hostage talks with Hamas collapsed last month. However, mediators Qatar and Egypt are pushing for a new agreement, a 60-day truce and the release of about half of the 50 hostages still believed to be in Gaza. While Hamas says it has accepted the proposal, Israel has not issued a formal response and insists it will only accept a comprehensive deal that secures the release of all hostages. Meanwhile, fighting continues on the ground. On Tuesday, around 18 Hamas militants emerged from a tunnel near Khan Yunis and attacked an Israeli Kfir brigade outpost with rifles and anti-tank grenade launchers. Israeli forces backed by airstrikes killed 10 of the attackers, while the rest retreated into the tunnel. 3 Israeli soldiers were injured in the ambush, none of them seriously. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Now let's take a look at some stories from around the world with our Choi Ji. Good morning, Ji.
Good morning, Anji.
So, Ji, let's begin in Europe, where Poland says a Russian drone has crashed in its territory. Tell us more.
Right. Poland's defense minister said that an object that crashed and exploded in eastern Poland was identified as a Russian drone. At a press conference on Wednesday afternoon, Poland's defense minister Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz stated that the military drone which crashed earlier that day was a Russian provocation during peace negotiations. At around 2 a.m. on August 20th, a drone crashed and detonated in a cornfield near Osini in Lublin province. The explosion shattered nearby windows but did not cause any injuries. An area of 8 to 10 meters around the crash site was burned. Poland's defense minister stated that the drone was Russian and likely a variant of the Shahed model equipped with a Chinese engine, which may have been designed to self-destruct mid-air. He called the incident a deliberate provocation by Russia amidst ongoing peace talks regarding Ukraine. Since a stray Ukrainian missile struck a southern Polish village in 2022, killing 2 people, Poland has been on high alert for objects entering its airspace. The Indian city of Mumbai is recovering from heavy rains that battered the city earlier this week. Since Monday, Mumbai saw over 409 millimeters of rain in just 36 hours. The torrential downpours paralyzed the city, submerging streets and disrupting both train and air travel. More than 1,000 people were evacuated from parts of Mumbai and Maharashtra state, and around 800 individuals who were stranded on a monorail were rescued on Tuesday. All public transport services in Mumbai, including local trains, resumed normal operations on Wednesday morning after a 15-hour disruption. The India Meteorological Department issued an orange alert for Mumbai and its neighboring districts on Wednesday, indicating that moderate to heavy rainfall is expected throughout the day. At least 21 people have died in rain-related incidents across Maharashtra state this week. Pope Leo XIV has designated Friday, August 22nd as a day of fasting and prayer for peace in Ukraine, the Middle East, and other war-torn regions. During his weekly audience at the Vatican on Wednesday, he encouraged all the faithful to live the day of August 22nd in fasting and prayer, asking God to grant peace and justice and to wipe away the tears of those who suffer because of the ongoing armed conflicts. This date coincides with the Catholic commemoration of the Queenship of the Blessed Virgin Mary, which honors Mary as the Queen of Peace. Gamescom 2025, the world's largest video games trade fair, has officially kicked off in Cologne, Germany. The event is open to the public starting Thursday at the Kernmesche Exhibition Center after it opened to media and trade visitors the day before. This year, Gamescom features a record 1,500 exhibitors from around the globe and is expected to attract over 300,000 attendees. Visitors will have the chance to explore game demos, attend panel discussions, and celebrate gaming culture. Most of the games showcased will be released in the coming months or in 2026. Gamescom runs until August 24th.
We are heading to the end of August, but the heat is not showing any sign of easing up. Heat wave warnings have been in place for nearly a week straight for the southern parts of Korea. And just yesterday, heat warnings have been expanded to parts of Gyeonggi-do and Chungcheong-do provinces. We're also watching for rain and scattered showers. Jeju is expected to see up to 40 millimeters of rainfall through this afternoon. In the meantime, the capital region, parts of Gangwon-do and Chungcheongnam-do province could see 5 to 40 millimeters of passing showers, and southern regions could see more than that. Now this afternoon, Seoul will be getting up to 32 degrees, but Daegu, Daejeon, Gyeongju will be topping out at 35 degrees Celsius. Feels like temperatures will be higher with that high humidity. This weekend also marks the Choseol, which traditionally signals the end of the summer heat, often called the Choseol magic. But this year, again, the sweltering heat is expected to linger even beyond Choseol, so take care.
Now that's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.